Here's a preview. The first page previews the chapter. Like I said, 10.1 is actually, could be a chapter in and of itself. We're going to take a look at today what plant assets are, tomorrow how things depreciate, and then Thursday what happens when you get rid of your plant assets. Every time I will lecture and you'll utilize these notes, and then we'll stop and do a couple problems with them, okay? I see the word asset in this term. Plant assets, as you learned in the video, and as we talked about yesterday when you took notes on the chapter, are assets that stick around for a while. They're also known as PPE, property, plant, and equipment, or you also hear of them called fixed assets. So PPE, property, plant, and equipment, or fixed assets. In other words, assets that are going to be around a while. They definitely have a substantial size and shape with them. They take up a lot of room. And as I really talked about yesterday, they're the assets that are used to make money. They help you to do business. I talked about Willys, the cost of the grocery carts. When you think about the size of space you need to store the grocery carts at Willys, it's the whole front part of the store. I would assume grocery carts are very expensive. Willys isn't selling grocery carts, but they use them to operate their business, and they take up a lot of space. Another fixed asset at Willys, or a plant asset, or PPE, all of them, all those terms can be used interchangeably. The cash registers. Think about how much space those cash registers take up. And in addition to the cash registers, the belts that you put your groceries on and it moves toward, all of those are plant assets. They take up a lot of space, and they use them to do business. Do they sell cash registers? Do they sell grocery carts? No, but they're assets that make it possible for Willys to do business. They don't sell them. So what do you need to know about assets, plant assets? They take up a lot of space typically. They're used to do business, and they don't sell them. They're going to be around for a while. The illustration was in the book. I've provided it in your notes. It's taking a look at the percentage of total assets. Southwest Airlines. Do they sell airplanes? No, but they use airplanes in order to do business. I was really surprised by Wendy's, the fast food chain. 73% of their assets are tied up in fixed assets. And 77% of Southwest Airlines. I mean, that was kind of a surprising statistic. Now, why is Caterpillar so small? They're selling their stuff. Okay? About half of Walmart's assets, so if you think of all of their inventory, half of their assets are tied up with plant assets. But you think about, very comparable to Willys, they're running a major retail store, and there's a lot of stuff, all the shelving, all the carts, all the big lanes, all their forklifts to move all of this bulky inventory. That makes sense, about half. And it certainly makes sense that 77% of Southwest Airlines is tied up in fixed assets, because they're not in the business of selling airplanes. I can't, why is Wendy's 73%? I'm not sure. That's a little bit of a curveball to me. It's not like they even deliver. They don't deliver the fast food and have a bunch of delivery cars. I don't know. That one to me is a curveball. You need to know that plant assets have a lot of hidden costs with them. And it's called the cost principle. It requires that all companies record plant assets at cost. What we bought them for, not necessarily what they're worth, plus all the add-ons. Costs consist of all expenditures necessary to not only get the asset, but to make it ready for its entire intended use. So you take a look at the asset, plus what it takes to acquire, plus what it takes to get it ready. What do I mean by this, or what's an example? When Heartland purchased that very prime real estate on the corner of 28 and Highway 9, it was a cornfield. Right now, we see a car dealership. So to acquire that land and to build a building, they had to get the land, make it ready to be a car dealership, like transform it from a cornfield to a paved lot that drains water and snow and can fit hundreds of cars on the lot, and to get that building ready to sell vehicles out of. So from a cornfield to a car lot is more than just let's buy the land. We got to get it ready to do business, and we have to simply get it. They're definitely plant assets. Yeah, and we're going to talk about them more in depth right now. For this chapter, and you don't have to necessarily write this because your following pages show you, we're going to talk about land, we're going to talk about land improvements, we're going to talk about buildings, and we're going to talk about equipment. All plant assets, all fixed assets, all needed to be able to do business. We're not really in the business of selling them, and they're going to be around a while. And then we're going to learn later on that some of our assets don't hold their value and they depreciate, as our video talked about and as the chapter talked about. So let's start with land. Probably be the next page in your notes. Land are all the necessary costs incurred in making the land ready for its intended use. Those costs or those add-ons typically include the purchase price, closing costs, which that happens when you close the deal, if you're going to go buy a chunk of land, you don't just like have a cash exchange on the land. You usually go sit down with an attorney present to make it a legal, binding transaction, and attorneys come at a big dollar amount. So the attorney fee gets rolled into the purchase price of the land. If you're going through a real estate or a realtor, they get a chunk. They're going to charge a little bit for you to make this transaction. And then any taxes or liens assumed by the purchaser. So you go buy a chunk of land for $100,000. Is it going to cost you $100,000? No. You're going to have some closing fees with it that usually go to an attorney. You're going to probably have a real estate commission, or a realtor gets their hands on it a little bit. And you're going to have to pay property taxes or settle any liens against the land. How does this look in accounting format? Hayes Manufacturing Company, and this is in your packets, right? Okay. Hayes Manufacturing Company acquires real estate at a cash cost of, well, what do you know, $100,000. Real estate doesn't necessarily mean a building. Real estate can be a chunk of land, it can be a commercial building or living quarters. The property contains an old warehouse that is raised at a net cost of $6,000. $7,500 in costs less the proceeds from the salvage materials, okay? So I see the word net, which means there's some math involved, and I'd be making these notations. So I go buy this property, and let's just say it's a barn on the property, okay? The barn is caving in, it's falling in, but then they call Junk by Jenny to say, hey, you come in here and we're gonna sell you all the barn wood and all the old windows for $1,500, but it's gonna cost us $7,500 to doze this thing. So they made a little bit of money, or they offset the dozing cost for a net cost of $6,000. They want the barn gone, but they're gonna try to make a little bit of money off of it. Other expenditures, we had to pay an attorney $1,000 and the realtor $8,000. What's the real cost of the land, or the net cost of the land? Let's take a look. That's the next little chunk. Is this in there too? Okay. So the cash, we bought the land for $100,000. The net removal, remember it was $7,500 to pay an excavator company to show up and doze the barn, minus, was it $1,500? Because Junk by Jenny's going to buy all the barn wood for $1,500. Okay, so that was a minus $6,000. No, I'm sorry, plus. Sorry. Minus a, sorry, plus. Gosh, got my pluses and minuses mixed up. We had to pay an attorney to make this all legal, and we had to pay the realtor to help shuffle the buyer and seller around. The land actually cost $115,000. What would a journal entry look like? I guess I thought that was on there. We got land and paid cash. There's another asset called land improvements. Cost of all expenditures necessary to make the improvements ready for their intended use. Maybe you got to make a driveway. I believe you legally have to have a driveway when you build property out in the country. You can't just like bang through the ditch to get there. You legally have to put a driveway in, okay? If it's a place of business, maybe you have to make a parking lot. You have to put a fence up. Any costs involved with landscaping or lighting the place. Think about the lighting that went into the new Heartland property. Car dealership lighting is among the best. They want their stuff looking good 24 hours a day. The thing about land improvements, they're not going to be around as long as the building. You pave a driveway, is that going to last forever? Is that going to last as long as your property is? No, wear and tear. Okay, are the lights going to last forever? Is your fence going to last forever? Will your landscaping last forever? No, it's got a much more limited useful life. And when it depreciates or loses its value, the cost of land improvements are looked at over their useful life. And in this case, that's certainly shorter than most fixed assets. Another fixed asset, of course, is a building. Whether you're directly purchasing it or you're constructing the building. You've got purchase costs and you've got construction costs. Purchase costs are the purchase price. Remember the closing fee, the legal piece with the attorney. Oftentimes, if you're purchasing something, you're going to build insurance right into it, and the realtor. A real estate broker is a fancy word for a realtor. Sometimes you can build right in, like if you plan on renovating right away or repairing or doing something structurally, whether that's the roof, the floor, the wiring, or the plumbing, that right away, that can get added to the value of your building. So if you go buy a fixer-upper and you know I'm going to put $100,000 into this thing, that can be valued at the building or the purchase price right away. Okay, how a constructed building differs. You're probably going to have a lot of these purchase costs in addition to paying an architect, getting permitting, or any excavating that needs to go in order to build the building. So an architect fee would be masked in the construction of a building. Permitting, meaning, you know, if it's a restaurant, you know, you'd have to get permits for your licensed kitchen, different things like that. Permitting is a huge thing when Riverview puts up another facility. So what are you going to do with all the poop? Okay, and Riverview's got that figured out, which is really cool. Or what excavation? What are you going to need to do to get that land ready to build something on it? Okay. What does this look like in a journal entry? Oh, I guess so they're not going to show us that. Never mind. Probably the easiest fixed asset to grasp is when you buy equipment. Acquiring the equipment and getting it ready to use. So can you tell that's a theme? Getting a building, getting it ready to use. Getting equipment, getting it ready to use. Okay. Typically, the costs include buying the equipment. Got to pay sales tax on equipment. It's a big part of it. You go buy a brand new car, you're going to pay sales tax. You go buy a brand new tractor, you're going to pay sales tax. Freight charges to get it to you. And insurance for the freight charges. If you're going to buy a brand new something up in Fargo and they're going to ship it to you, you probably should insure it while it's on that, especially if it's free on board for the shipper, not free on board for the buyer. You're going to want to make sure that $250,000 piece of equipment gets to you safely. If they bring you a tractor in pieces, which they don't do, but just using that as an analogy, if you have to pay someone to put it together or install it or test it, those set of fees get added to the acquisition of the equipment. A good example would maybe be, a hot tub isn't necessarily equipment, but I'll just use a hot tub as an example. If you buy a hot tub up in Alec and they deliver it to you on a truck and you have to pay for delivery, that would be the freight charge plus if you insure it to get here. But then once it arrives and it's not put together and Alec the delivery guy has to put your hot tub together and maybe get it going and test the water quality, whatever, all of that stuff would get added to the value of the equipment. Okay, finally we're seeing a journal transaction. Is this one in your notes? Okay. Leonard Company purchases a truck for $22,000. They had sales tax of $13.20. What's another way you might see that in the transaction? Instead of giving the dollar amount, what could you see them doing? put the percentage in. You know, you paid 3% sales tax. Well, then you'd have to figure out that dollar amount. They added some paint and lettering. Is that very common? Yeah, a delivery truck, you know, you see, let's use Pizza Ranch for example. They have the like stuff on the side. Willys has a bunch of beep paint and decals pertinent to their truck. They had to get it licensed for 80 bucks. They got a 3-year accident policy for $1,600. So what's the actual cost of the delivery truck? Well, paid $22,000. Paid $1,320 in sales tax. The paint and lettering was $500. And these are all getting added to the purchase price. Not sure what's going on here. Oh, finally we're going to do a journal entry too. Now, why are we not seeing the insurance come down here? That's not to get it to us. That's not insurance. No, that's prepaid insurance. Mallory's right. That's a whole nother thing, I think. We'll see. Otherwise, it would show up down there. No, they're just knocking part of the price off. Yeah. The journal entry now would be this. We gained this fixed asset under the PPE umbrella, property, plant, and equipment. Whoa, wait a minute. I thought the thing was $22,000. Why is it showing up at a value of $23,820? Because of these. See, now here's prepaid insurance. But notice this is another asset going up. Remember how there's cash and petty cash and supplies and equipment, and then the least liquid asset is prepaid insurance. That's where that player comes in. Why is this a line item by itself? Any idea? It's a recurring expense. How often do you have to put tabs on? You have to put tabs on every year. And that it's not adding to the value of the equipment. It's just like an expensive, you put tabs on when you buy it, but then that expense is going to show up again in a year when you have to put tabs on again. And if cash is equal to all of that. Is prepaid insurance going to show up again? Yep, when you renew your policy. That's why they're separate line items. So I think what gets confusing is there's a lot of players up here in this transaction. Some of them relate directly to the equipment. Some of them are add-ons that happen annually or quarterly or whatever the case is. We're going to do 3 exercises. Perfect amount of time. Exercise 10.1, 10.2, and 10.3. Tomorrow, we're going to get into the second phase of part 1, because remember, part 1, like I said, could be a chapter in and of itself. Here's buying the plant assets. Tomorrow, we're going to learn how they depreciate or lose value over time. And then Thursday, we're going to figure out, all right, what do we do when we sell them? Like, can you make money off your pizza delivery car? Yeah, yeah, you can. Are you going to take a loss, take a gain, or break even? That's coming Thursday. So we're into the exercises. We'll do 3 together, beginning at exercise 10.1 at the top, basically page 503. The following expenditures related to plant assets that were made by Prathler Company in the first 2 months of 2014. But I want you to skip down to the instructions part. Part A, where the pencil is. Explain the application of the historical cost principle in determining the acquisition of a plant asset. I'm going to show you what the answer key says, and we'll talk through it. I don't expect you to put all of that in. What you need to know is the acquisition of a fixed or plant or PPE asset is more than just buying it. It's all the expenditures necessary to acquire it and make it ready for its intended use. So for Willys and their new, fairly new self-checkouts, they had to buy those self-checkouts. There's 4 of them. I bet they're astronomically expensive. They had to get them there. So in other words, pay for delivery, more than likely. To make them ready for their intended use, not only did they need those 4 self-checkouts like functioning with their computer system, they had to train people how to monitor them. So it wasn't just the purchase of those 4 checkouts. It's to get them there, acquire them, and make them ready for their intended use, which involved training people. Okay, for example, they give you an example. The cost of factory machinery, so a robot, basically, includes the price, freight cost, insurance. Now hold the show. What kind of insurance? Basically transit insurance, the insurance from point A to point B, not to insure it for the next 3 years. And then install costs. That was an example. But what you need to know is they buy it, plus they got to get it there, and they got to get ready for its intended use. Now B, it's basically taking a look at all these transactions up here and putting a number with them. Like what should be debited? In other words, what's the real cost of the fixed asset that we're getting? And I'll go back up to number 1. Paid $5,000 of accrued taxes at the time a plant site was acquired. I thought I was going to look for dollar amounts, but whatever. Let's look at that again. Paid $5,000 of accrued taxes at the time a plant site was acquired. Why is that a debit to land? Why is the value of land going up? Because we bought it, and there were taxes that were hanging around with it. Paid $200 in insurance to cover possible accident loss on a new factory machine while it was in transit. What's going to be the debit there? Prepaid insurance? No, it's going to be equipment. Why is it not prepaid insurance? What are we insuring here on this equipment? The transit. We're insuring the transit. It's equipment because we are insuring the transit of it. Do you think you need insurance to transport something? Yeah. Accidents happen. And your asset will be strewn in pieces along the interstate if you haven't had it insured. And there you will get to see the pieces. Paid $850 sales tax on the delivery of a new truck. What's the debit? Equipment. We're getting a new truck and we pay sales taxes on it. The value of that truck goes up. 4, think about this really carefully. Paid $17,500 for parking lots and driveways at a new plant site. Land improvements. Why is it not land? We already have the land. The land's going to be the land for a long time. Will the parking lot and driveway last forever? That's the reason it's a land improvement. These are more of the short-term improvements to the land. We're going to have to replace that driveway eventually, or put new, gravel down. And we're going to have to do something with the parking lot eventually. 5, paid $250 to have company name and advertising slogan painted on the new delivery truck. What value is going to increase? The truck, which is known as the equipment value, is going to go up because we had stuff painted on the side of it. 6, paid $8,000 for the installation of new factory machinery. What's going to go up? Why is it equipment? We got the stuff, but we're not maybe qualified to put it together. We're going to have to pay someone to do that, and that's going to get masked on the overall value of that equipment. Paid $9,000 for a 1-year accident insurance policy on a new delivery truck. What's going to be debited? This time it's prepaid insurance. We're not insuring the transit of it. We're insuring it for the next year. So do you see the difference? You usually are going to see like a number of year policy on this one versus we're going to insure it to transport it, excuse me. Number 8, paid $75 in motor vehicle licensing fees for a new truck. Are those going to be a reoccurring cost? What's the debit? License expense, that's a weird one. I'd account miscellaneous expense. The key word there is it's an expense. It's an annual or ongoing cost. It's not my vehicle's worth more. No, the state that you live in says you have to probably put tabs on that. Easy? I think the most confusing bit is it land or is it an improvement of the land? Remember, land improvements are more like the little stuff that's going to crumble faster, okay? And then are we insuring the transportation of something or the transit of something or more long-term? Let's go on to exercise 10-2. I want you to try this one on your own. It's asking you to simply indicate the debit of each of these costs. So 10-2, the debit. And then we'll see how you do. You don't have to put the dollar amounts in there. For example, the first one is equipment. I know a few of you don't have your books, which make this very difficult to do. Some of you need to fire up a little bit, meaning like, what if I graded what you did today, how well you took notes and how well you did everything? What if that was your 5 points? Some of you would be in a world of hurt for the test already. We'll go through them. Number 1, if I'm paying sales tax on machinery, that's equipment. If I'm putting paint and lettering on the equipment, equipment. If I'm installing or testing that equipment, equipment. If I have to pay a realtor to buy land, that's land. If I'm insuring for the first year of the new truck, that's prepaid insurance. Why is it not the equipment? What didn't I insure? The transit of that equipment to me. The cost of landscaping, land improvement, the addition of a paved parking lot, land improvement, because those two things, landscaping and a paved parking lot, will crumble, die sooner than the land itself. Why is number 8 simply land? It's getting it ready. Okay? Cost of clearing, draining, and filling the land. That's the excavating piece. Okay? Before Heartland was built, we saw a bunch of big boys in their big toys in a giant sandbox, getting it ready. Excavating, clearing it, getting it ready for its intended use. And then number 9, architects' fees would be buildings. Because remember, buildings can either be purchased or they can be constructed. And if they have to be constructed, someone has to design that. Okay, let's go on to the third one of the day. It's starting to get a little bit repetitive. Let's see what this one has to say. Okay, ooh, oh boy. On March 1st, Westmoreland Company acquired real estate on which it planned to construct a small office building. So they bought land. Is that assumable land? The company paid $75,000 in cash. So we're going to see, I think we're going to see 2. Yeah, so we're looking at the land and the construction, okay? We paid $75,000 for this piece of land, but what was sitting on the land? An old warehouse on the property was raised, or in other words, like demoed, at a cost of $8,600. But Junk by Jenny swooped in there and did what? Bought some of the salvage materials, okay? So we're looking at a net of $6,900 because this was the excavating. They're calling it a, I think I'm saying that right, raised, but we're demoing. Okay, I'm going to call that a demo. Minus what we sold for salvaged. You know, so I'm going to go in and buy the door, or buy the windows, or buy the stuff. So the key there is that's the net. What else was going on here? Additional expenditures before construction even began. We had to pay an attorney, $1,100. Okay, and then a realtor got a $5,000 cut. Now, why am I going to stop there? The rest is not the land, it's the construction of the new building. So this is basically the cost to, well, the purchase plus the, well, which is basically acquiring, plus to get it ready for its intended use. $88,000 worth of just land. Hold the show. I thought we paid $75,000 for it. Add all that other stuff on. Got to ditch the bad building. We've got to pay an attorney and pay a realtor. And then we're looking at an $88,000 price tag. Okay, what happens here? Then we can start building. We're going to pay an architect $7,800 to just design our new building. And then we've got to put in $14,000 worth of land improvements. Okay, so the architect fee is the building, and the $14,000 is land improvements. We still don't have a building, do we? There's still no building. We've paid an architect to give us a plan. But we'd have a whole other set of building costs once construction actually happens.